The University of Houston moved from its original home at San Jacinto High School to its new campus and current location in June 1939. Few people anticipated how dramatically the following years would transform Houston, Texas, and its young university when the United States was drawn into World War II. The war brought loss and turmoil, but also placed the city and the university on a path toward greater growth and prosperity. Only 2 buildings were standing when the new campus opened in 1939.
It was entirely a commuter college. There were no dormitories or housing of any sort. Basically, it was just an extension of what it had been at San Jacinto, although naturally, with a regular campus that they could use full-time.
Constructed first, the Roy G. Cullen Building included offices, classrooms, and the library. The university named the building for Hugh Roy Cullen's only son, Roy, who had died in an oil field accident. Hugh Roy Cullen, an oil man whose own education ended at age 12, placed only one condition on his gift for the building. The University of Houston must always be a college for working men and women and their sons and daughters, although in the Jim Crow South, the university, for the most part, was only available to white students. Cullen and the foundation he formed in 1947 became the university's largest benefactors. Cullen was part of a loyal civil elite in Houston who returned much of their fortunes to the city.
But they saw this other need of how do we have a university for the mass of people in Houston, and they really got in line. And obviously the key person in that world was Hugh Roy Cullen, who we owe our pursuit of excellence to. He started it.
And the Cullen Building offered a rare treat. It was the first air-conditioned building at any U.S. university.
Oh, it was wonderful, because in all our homes, all we had was attic fans or overhead fans or the regular plug-in fans. So it was hot in summer.
The Science Building, the second one on campus, faced the Cullen Building across the reflecting pool. Erected by the Federal Emergency Administration of Public Works, the Science Building housed natural sciences and mathematics. Settling into the university's new home, Oberholzer and Vice President Walter Kimmerer worked hard to increase the university's enrollment numbers and to improve curriculum.
Dr. Oberholzer was the real moving force in the foundation of the University of Houston, and Dr. Kimmerer was probably brought the first big push for more academic excellence on the campus, and I admired him.
In 1939, the university launched its first graduate program, a master's in education. 1 year later, the university enrollment topped 6,400, a gain of nearly 4,000 students in just 6 years. Campus life took shape. Frontier Fiesta debuted in spring 1940. Students built a life-size 1880s frontier village to hold a dance contest and other events, starting a UH tradition that has been suspended only once, during World War II.
On the brink of World War II, Houston was coming out of the Great Depression gradually, but a little faster than the rest of the country. It was the established oil refining center of the nation.
While the city stood poised for increased wartime activity, World War II presented the University of Houston with new challenges. Oberholzer and Kimmerer prepared to make the changes necessary to keep their young university on the move.
My worry then was that we were a tuition-supported school and war coming on. We were afraid we were going to lose our students and we're going to have a hard time surviving, so we better get into the war effort.
In addition to regular classes, Kemmerer developed military training programs and courses for the city's wartime workers. Dr. Charles Hiller, who was the university bursar at the time, later reminisced.
To show you something about the spirit of the University of Houston, when it became obvious that we would be short of students during the war, we had an opportunity to serve the country in a variety of schools, and we put on a Navy training program. We had some aviation work, military aviation work, and 2 or 3 other programs related to the war effort.
When the university approached the U.S. Navy about a training program, the Navy hesitated, fearing that the campus could not accommodate the influx of trainees. Believing that the program was essential to the university's survival during war, Kemmerer promised the Navy that the new recreation building would be finished when the trainees arrived. The university had 3 months to make good on the promise.
Now, this building, was built under a 5-pole circus tent. The work went on 24 hours a day, and it took 7 weeks from the day we started to get the building in use. That didn't mean it was all finished, from the center to the end was finished. We marched the men in there on the 1st of March, which was the date we had agreed to deliver the building, and they were still finishing the floors. We had a hard time getting all we needed to build it, because every time we had a shipment coming in here, the shipyards down the line would grab all the timber and everything else that we had coming in, because the shipyards had higher priority than we did as a school.
So shipbuilding's a very high priority. The best way to imagine them is Henry Ford's Model T, but instead of a Model T, a big ship is going down banana peels into the Houston Ship Channel. It's a stunning performance by the American economy, and Houston sure plays its role in that, to do the things that give us this overwhelming advantage in equipment that helps win the war.
By 1943, more than $1 billion in federal contracts had flowed to the city of Houston, much of it to the shipbuilders. Mayor Otis Massey declared November 26th as the City of Houston Day to celebrate the 100th Liberty ship constructed in the city. Houston had long been home to the nation's oil business, but the demands of war transformed this business into the modern petrochemical industry.
The petrochemical industry and the refining industry together are probably among the 2 or 3 things that tip the balance in the war.
As early as 1940, the War Department signed with Humble Oil to manufacture a petroleum byproduct that became the main ingredient in TNT. The war in the Pacific made the acquisition of natural rubber nearly impossible, but Shell Oil and others became pioneers in producing synthetic rubber from petroleum. Governor Coke Stevenson proclaimed June 28, 1943, American-Made Rubber Day in Texas, predicting that the state would lead the nation in synthetic rubber production. And the nation still needed oil. Completed in 1943, the Big Inch pipeline transported oil from Texas to the East Coast. While German U-boats waited in the Gulf of Mexico, the 1,200-mile pipeline safely carried 300,000 barrels a day. Tens of thousands flocked to Houston to fill jobs in these booming industries.
Houston had been growing rapidly, but nothing like the World War II boom. So there's very crowded. The conditions are bizarre, intense, because so much war production is going on here. So I interviewed a woman who came here to work, who came here to follow her husband, who was being trained at Ellington Field, which is a very big training for pilots and bombardiers for World War II, out toward Clear Lake. She said the only place she could find to live was in South Houston on a screened porch. So she rented literally a screened porch in a person's house where there were war workers and all the other rooms sharing the house in the winter without windows.
Congressman Albert Thomas appealed to the National Housing Administration for 6,400 additional dwellings in Harris County. The NHA approved only 500 new units for war workers, and housing shortages persisted.
Another thing we do in World War II is create programs where Mexican nationals can come work, and particularly in the refineries. So the equivalent of bracero programs that are for agricultural workers in other parts of history to provide the labor to work in the mobilization industries.
A lot of Mexican origin people came during the Second World War because they needed people for the fields because all the soldiers were gone, and they needed people to work in all the other labor jobs.
Other migrants came from small cities in Texas and Louisiana and other places around the United States. Many of these newcomers found their way to the University of Houston campus. In addition to the military training programs, local companies such as Hughes Tool and Reed Rollerbit sent employees to the university for advanced training.
That experience was a tremendous experience. We established a radio school to prepare young men here to go to an advanced school where they would learn the operation of radar. We gave them elementary electricity and radio material education. Several thousand students went through, and many of them, I know, contributed a great deal to the war effort.
At that time, the University of Houston was still a very small campus, and it was actually like two campuses. On the north part, completely separated from our student life at our campus. The armed services had barracks buildings where they trained and gave classes. On our part of the campus, the ratio, because of so many being gone off to war of the men, was probably 5 to 1 girls against boys.
Student organizations did their part in many ways. The Student Council joined the all-female Buckaroo Riding Club to hold war bond drives and sponsored weekly song fests and stamp sales. The Girls Sports Club launched a scrap drive. Indeed, much of campus life revolved around exciting ways to support the war effort. As the burden of war fell on America's youth, former University of Houston student George Chesson put pen to paper, capturing the sentiments and the commitment of his generation.
The poem Prospect was written one evening just before I joined the service. I walked home through a heavy rain. After I reached home, I spent the time until almost daylight writing and volunteered the next day. The peace that blessed my childhood scene is but a fading vision of the past, and though those fields may yet be green, the sky is overcast. No longer do the clouds o'erhead fantastic shapes assume to please my mind, but serve alone their tears to shed for me and my kind.
More than 1,200 students and former students served in the military during the war. On campus, students sewed a flag with 1 star for each student in the service, updating the flag with gold stars for those who made the ultimate sacrifice. Psychology professor Roy Crouch felt the toll of war as keenly as anyone on campus. Lauren, his youngest son and a UH student, survived the attack at Pearl Harbor, but died 5 months later at the Coral Sea. Roy Jr. flew 47 missions before he was shot down over Germany. He spent 6 months as a prisoner. And their sister Jean, another UH student, lost her husband in the war. The 1945 Houstonian listed 82 students missing or killed in action. With many of its students off to war, the university faced a different challenge at home. The Board of Education of the Houston Independent School District had governed the university from its beginning, but Oberholzer and Kemmerer frequently clashed with the district officials and board members. The complex needs of the university, which now had 6 colleges and a graduate school, simply outstripped the board's ability to govern it. In 1943, Hugh Roy Cullen and 14 leading Houstonians formed an advisory board. They planned to separate the university from the district, but decided to wait until the war ended and enrollments increased.
There was, I hate to say it, a good deal of politics involved in the development of this institution. When the separate board was set up, then we were free to do certain things with their approval, of course, and that meant that we had a board that would spend its time thinking about our problems instead of splitting time with the Houston School District.
Students felt equally impassioned. Believing separation essential to the university's future, hundreds petitioned for a change. In February 1945, the Cougar editor wrote,
If we're forced to remain under the direction of a school board that admittedly does not have enough time to give us, we may have to sit back and watch other colleges take over here while this college gradually disintegrates.
A month later, the state legislature passed a bill separating the university from the school district. The advisory board became the first Board of Regents.
Well, that was wonderful because it gave us the status of having a degree that had more meaning. Your degree became more meaningful when you went out into the professional world and job hunting, and it had greater status.
The Regents elected longtime benefactor Hugh Roy Cullen as their chairman.
He was able to get the very top business people in the community on the board with him. So he brought the top level of the city of Houston to the leadership of the University of Houston.
On June 22, 1944, President Roosevelt signed the Servicemen's Readjustment Act, more popularly known as the GI Bill.
The big change comes after the war, and that's the GI Bill, one of the most successful in terms of the people involved and the institutions of the nation, policies of government in that whole era. A very simple idea. These people have interrupted their life and lost their life, and families have lost loved ones. In a war, we owe it to them to open opportunity for them. And the GI Bill said to all the people who had served, the nation owes you a debt, and here it is. Here's a check to start that payment. So the big thing for U of H and for every state university in America, not just U of H, is it gave us a new student body who had their way paid. So the government money allowed people to come back to school to suspend their regular life, usually at a fairly advanced age in their 20s, not as 18-year-old freshmen, and really say, we're going to give you a chance to enter the job market at a level that you weren't at when you left it. And so the universities had to respond and say, we need to teach these hardened veterans of combat quite often. You can't just say, now your homework is due, you got to learn to teach to them. And we need to provide opportunity, and we need to somehow have the resources, find the resources to give them places to live.
We began to have a tremendous influx of veterans. I know we had so many, I think we had more than the University of Texas. Someone suspected that we had them hanging out of the windows. They had a committee privately come in to run a survey on us, a visual survey, to see the students hanging out of the windows. They didn't find anything. What they didn't realize was that we were running classes from 7 o'clock in the morning until 10 or 11 at night. You can run an awful lot of people through.
Of course, the growth itself, the GI Bill and the veterans caused an immediate change in the volume of students, and which was wonderful. It let the campus grow.
When the war was over, we had the exciting chance to do something for the returning soldiers and sailors and aviators and so forth. Dr. Kimmerer's imagination was working on overtime all the time on how to do, and so we began a program of staggered entrance times. We would start new classes about every 6 weeks right around the year, so that as the military released men, and they came out and asked about when they could get into school, we had something we could tell them in at least a few weeks' time. We opened our doors, and we were the only school in this area with a wide open policy. You could come. You didn't have to be a former student to come on in. And we had people from as far away as Colorado coming down here to get to college.
The GI Bill had been passed, and suddenly people that would never dream of going to college were going to college. It was the most wonderful thing. It was a game changer for America. It gave a stipend of $75 a month, and then plus it paid all your expenses. And more important than that, at the University of Houston, they had 75 counselors to help these returning veterans with everything that they needed. Not necessarily with more money, but with advice on what to do, because many of these kids were from farm communities that had never been off the farm. And suddenly here they are in Houston, Texas, in college. Some were ill-equipped for it, some of them didn't make it, but they all had a chance. And many of them got their degree and changed the face of Houston.
Increased enrollment at the university added to the demand for housing in a city already bulging at the seams.
Dr. Kammerer bargained with various sources for living quarters, and then he got from the various locations around here that had been related to shipbuilding trailers, single trailers and expandable trailers.
My father signed us up, and he dropped us off at Trailer Village. Trailer Village was 100 Army surplus house trailers that were about 22 feet long, very small, that had been set up on campus for returning GIs. The bathroom was a block and a half away, so it was not very luxurious.
Recalling Trailer Village, or Veterans Village, Dr. Hiller noted,
There had to be a store over there, and of course we had to put in streets, water lines, sewer lines, along with everything else, and it was quite a considerable enterprise, and it served a great many people very, very well.
It gave those people a place to live. It wasn't the most satisfactory situation in the world, but we didn't have any dormitories for them, and they wanted to live near the campus.
Many returning GIs moved into Veterans Village with their brides. Young children soon joined the ranks.
And it was kind of tough on them. Of course, I'm young and single. It didn't strike me that much at that time, but now looking back, I understand it was awfully hard on them.
Despite the housing shortages, the city's population and industry continued to grow.
In terms of just industry as a whole, the good thing for America and for Houston and for U of H about the post-war boom is the country's been kind of waiting for 15 years to live normal lives, pursue careers.
Campus facilities expanded to meet the demand, while the post-war years also witnessed the birth of professional schools in pharmacy, nursing, optometry, and law.
There was a lot of practical-minded people that said, I like history, I like literature, but I want to go take part in this boom. And so the professional schools are a very obvious response to that.
When I came back, I was extremely fortunate in the sense that my brother had come back and become a member of the first law class at the University of Houston, where they just started. And fortunately for us, they needed students. They needed new law students. It was very nice. And the GI Bill, my law class was 4/5 GIs, about that. And I think the best term I can use for our class was they were hungry. They were veterans. They were coming back from war. And they were eager and hungry. Hungry for knowledge and accomplishment is a better way to put it.
Eager and hungry, too, Houstonians enthusiastically worked to accommodate their expanding population. Between 1940 and 1950, the city grew some 50% to nearly 600,000 people.
became a big city. At the time I left, you'd have to consider it as mid-America, not big city, but it started the big change right after the war.
Now the largest city in the American South, Houston remained a segregated city. Many of its opportunities were available only to white Americans, and the same was true at its university. War and its aftermath helped place the University of Houston on a path toward greater success. In time, both the university and the city would be forced to address the challenges of segregation and to provide opportunities for all the working men and women who now call Houston home.
My jelly roll. Jelly roll. Wouldn't give you a piece of cake, not to save your soul. Save your soul. My mama told me when she went away, if you're a good boy, I'll show you all of my toys. There ain't no use in you hanging round. Hanging round. I know you need it, gonna put you down. Down, down, down. My jelly roll is sweet. You need it, you can't have it. I ain't gonna give you none.